What kind of man returns home on a freezing New Year's evening and finds a stranger breathing in his bed of silence? The question hangs in the air like the fog of his breath as Ethan Cole rides through the white dusk, the snow whispering beneath his boots when he finally dismounts. The world is still, held in a fragile pause between the old year and the new, and yet he feels something unsettled in the air. His cabin sits where the pines thin out and the mountains open wide, a lone shape against the pale horizon. It should feel familiar, safe, but tonight, the door is open. Just a little, just enough to unsettle the heart. Ethan stands there for a long second, letting the cold bite into his skin, letting instinct do its quiet work. The latch is never loose. The door is never ajar. Not here, not in winter. He moves toward it slowly, not with fear, but with the caution of a man who has lived long enough to know that danger often arrives quietly. He pushes the door inward, and the first breath of warm air slips past him, carrying the faint smell of smoke, damp cloth, and exhaustion. Then he sees her. Maya Rivers lies curled near the stove, wrapped in one of his blankets, like a ghost that chose warmth over vanishing into the night. She is small, thinner than she should be, her dress torn, the leather scraped and darkened. Frost lingers in the ends of her hair. Bruises bloom across her skin like painful shadows. She does not move. For a moment he wonders if he is staring at death itself, come to rest in his home. But then he hears it. The faintest sound. A breath, fragile, strained, almost apologetic. He does not shout. He does not demand. He simply watches. Years of living alone have carved him into something quiet, measured, patient. So he crosses the room, sets down his gloves, and kneels by the stove. The fire has burned low, only embers breathing. He feeds the flame with steady hands, coaxing life back into it. Light rises slowly, warming the lines of her face. Her eyelids twitch. Her fingers tense beneath the blanket, as if even in sleep she expects pain to follow her. Who is she running from? The question forms, but he does not speak it. Some truths come when they are ready. When she stirs, it is sudden. Her gaze snapping open, sharp, terrified, like a deer caught in a hunter's sights. She scrambles back, or tries to, but her body betrays her. Pain floods through her expression. Ethan lifts his hands, palms open, voice low, smooth, steady, like the snow outside. You're safe here. Simple words, grounded, real, no promises beyond truth. She studies him, breath shallow, eyes still locked in some memory far from this cabin. But she does not scream. She does not bolt. She simply watches, as though deciding whether the world has finally offered kindness or simply another trap. He moves slowly, careful to never close the space too quickly. He adds wood. He pours water. He lets heat fill the room and time soften the edges. Only when the tremor eases from her shoulders does he speak again. You can stay, rest. We'll figure the rest out later. No questions, not yet. Survival comes first. Maya's body gives in before her mind does. The weight of cold, terror, and exhaustion presses her back toward the floor. Her eyes flutter. Relief does not come easily, but it comes anyway, slipping past fear the way sunlight slips past clouds. She falls asleep there by the stove, wrapped in his blanket, wrapped in the smallest hint of trust. Ethan settles into his old wooden chair. He does not sleep deeply, only enough to let the night pass. Outside, the wind sighs. The fire hums, and in the quiet, something begins. Not love, not yet. Something simpler. Two lives that were never meant to meet have crossed paths in the dead of winter. Morning comes gently. The first sound is the soft tap of the coffee pot shifting on the stove. Ethan opens his eyes to find the room washed in pale winter light. Maya is still there, but something in her has eased. The lines of fear on her face have softened. Her breathing is deep. Real rest. Rare, fragile, precious. The pot clicks again. Her eyes snap open. The instinct to flee rises hard and fast. But this time, she does not leap up. Instead, she watches him. Watches the way he pours coffee. The way he does not crowd her with his presence. The way silence, here, is not a threat. Her voice comes slowly, as though unused. "My name is Maya." He nods. "Ethan." Names are bridges, and this one holds. Bit by bit, the truth emerges. Not through dramatic confessions, but through quiet exchanges shaped by trust. She tells him about the peaceful camp beneath the foothills, about the 5 men who came pretending to search for strays, but wanting more, about violence that rose like a storm, about running until the land nearly swallowed her whole. He does not question, he does not doubt. "You're safe," he says again, not as comfort, but as fact. And so the days begin. He repairs fences. He checks the stock. She learns the shape of the cabin, the rhythm of the stove, the small work that makes her feel useful again. A careful peace settles between them. Not loud, not fragile, just real. But peace never lasts long in places like this. On the 4th morning, Ethan goes down to the creek. Snow breaks beneath his boots. Frost glints in the pale sun, and there he finds it. Fresh hoofprints, deep, heavy, not his. They have found the trail. He stands there a long moment, the cold gnawing quietly at his bones. Then he turns back toward the cabin, toward Maya, toward the storm that is coming for both of them. Because sometimes, whether you want it or not, fate chooses you, and once chosen, there is no turning back. The creek water ran thin beneath the ice that morning, and the sound of it lingered in Ethan's thoughts long after he'd come back to the cabin. He did not mention the hoofprints right away. Instead, he let the day move slowly, like a cautious animal stepping into an open field. Maya was sitting near the stove, the blanket drawn around her shoulders, the soft light warming her bruised skin. Her hands were steadier than before, but her eyes still carried that far-off vigilance, as if part of her remained somewhere in the night she had escaped. She noticed the quiet shift in him before he said a word. Maybe it was the way he hung his coat. Maybe it was the stillness in his posture. Whatever it was, she watched him with calm alertness, waiting to see whether the world was about to change again. Recovery did not come to her all at once. It arrived in fragments, in the way she could finally stand long enough to stir the pot on the stove. In the moment, she dared to leave the blanket behind and wrap herself in one of his worn shirts instead. In the softening of her shoulders when he spoke to her, gently, like a man unsure if a sudden sound might shatter something fragile. Ethan had always thought of his cabin as a shelter from the world. Now it had become something more, an in-between space where 2 strangers hovered in that thin line between safety and what used to be fear. There was warmth here, yes. But there was also the sense that danger had simply paused, waiting in the trees. It was during one of those quietly shared mornings that Maya finally spoke of the attack. She didn't begin with drama. She simply looked at the flames for a long while, and then she said, "They came before dawn." Her voice was low, even, the way a person speaks when memory has burned itself too deeply to flare up anymore. Ethan didn't interrupt. He only listened. She told him of the men who rode into the valley under the pretense of searching for cattle, their eyes scanning not the horizon, but the people. Their talk was hard, their hands harder. They took food first. Then they wanted more. When protest rose, violence followed. It was fast, ruthless, like a storm that had been building for years but chose that single morning to break loose. Maya did not describe every detail. She didn't have to. The silence between her sentences filled in the rest. She fled because there was no other choice. Across the ridge, through snow that swallowed sound and hope alike. She walked until her body barely remembered how. The cold made every step feel like the last. Somewhere between terror and numbness, she saw the faint glow of Ethan's cabin through the trees. A single square of light. She didn't think of who might live there. She only thought of warmth, of not vanishing into the white. When she finished, the room fell into a thoughtful quiet. Ethan let the story sit there, between them, like a truth that had finally found a place to rest. He didn't promise justice. He didn't speak of revenge. He spoke only what he knew he could hold. "You don't have to run now," he said. And she believed him. Days slipped by in a rhythm neither of them expected. Ethan worked outside, checking fence lines and the creek, while Maya tended to the inside world, sweeping, folding, setting things into order. Not because he asked, but because doing so grounded her, giving shape to the fragile idea that this place might be more than a hiding spot. Sometimes their hands brushed when they passed near the stove. Sometimes their eyes met for a second too long before one of them looked away. The air between them grew warm in a way that had nothing to do with the fire. Yet the unease beneath the peace never fully disappeared. When the wind shifted, Ethan would pause, listening. When a branch cracked in the distance, Maya's gaze flicked toward the door. They were not naive. They both knew the world beyond the cabin did not forget so easily. But for the first time since Maya had stumbled into the snow-lit refuge, their fear did not isolate them. It bound them together. One evening, Ethan returned with a faint trace of snow dusting his coat and a quiet certainty resting on his face. He didn't say it aloud, but Maya sensed it anyway. Something out there had changed. Something had moved closer. He cooked stew that night with a rare focus, as if the routine itself might hold the world steady. They ate at the small table. The lantern light laid soft gold across the wooden walls. Neither said much, but their silence carried weight, not emptiness. Later, when the fire sank into its softer glow, Maya spoke again. This time, not of the past, but of the heaviness inside it. She confessed that she hadn't expected kindness, not from anyone. Not after the men who believed the land, the cattle, and even people could belong to them if they simply reached far enough. She expected that Ethan might turn her out, or claim her, or trade safety for obedience. But he had done none of that. He had simply allowed her the room to exist, to breathe, to be. Ethan didn't look away. He let the truth sit where it landed. Then he said, "No one owns you." The words were simple, unpolished, but they carried the gravity of something he had learned the hard way. That night, sleep came easier. Not because the world was safer, but because the heart, wounded, wary, and tired, had finally found solid ground to stand on. And somewhere far beyond their small oasis of lamplight and wood smoke, the riders who once believed they could take whatever they wanted continued their search. The snow kept their secrets for now, but the trail had not gone cold, and fate, patient as winter, was still moving toward them. The wind came first, a low whisper sliding through the pines, carrying the memory of hoofbeats across the frozen ground. Ethan heard it before he saw anything, the way a man learns to sense danger by the shape of silence rather than the sound itself. He stood near the barn, one hand resting on the worn wood, and watched the pale morning settle into the valley. The snow was no longer untouched. It bore marks now, fresh, deep, purposeful. Riders, more than one, moving with intent. He followed the trail only a short distance, just far enough to read it. 2 horses, both shod. The weight of the prints said the men wore guns, maybe rifles. They had not passed by. They had come here, then turned back, only to circle, as if deciding how bold they wished to be. Ethan did not sigh, did not curse. He simply took in the truth and carried it back to the cabin with him. Inside, the fire was already working, the small room wrapped in its quiet warmth. Maya was at the table, hands curled around a tin cup, eyes searching his face before he spoke a word. She did not ask what he had seen. She already knew. Her voice was steady, though. "They're close." He nodded. There was nothing to soften, nothing to dress up in false hope. "They'll come," he said. "Soon." For a moment, the air thickened with everything unspoken. Fear, memory, the long shadow of what had driven her here. But then Maya breathed out slowly, as if letting go of the last illusion that she could outrun the past. "I won't bring trouble on your home," she whispered. "If I leave, He cut her off gently, not with harshness, but with finality. This is my home. What happens here is my decision. And that, more than any promise, held weight. By afternoon, the mist rolled down from the ridge, softening the edges of the world. The snow glowed pale beneath it, like a secret trying not to be seen. Ethan stepped outside and stayed there, leaning against the porch post, waiting. He did not hide. He did not pretend he hadn't noticed the prints. Men like those didn't respect fear. They respected the line you drew, and whether you held it. The riders appeared as dark figures emerging from the gray veil, two shapes on horseback moving slow and deliberate. They stopped a few yards from the cabin, letting the horses paw the snow, their eyes already measuring the land, the house, the man guarding it. One of them, tall, with a worn hat pulled low, shifted his reins lazily, as if this were simply a social call, but his hand never strayed far from his gun. "Afternoon," he said, voice flat, polite in the way rudeness sometimes wears manners. "We're looking for a girl, Apache, small, hurt, might have come through here." Ethan didn't answer right away. He let the quiet stretch, owning the land beneath his feet, the air between them. "You're on my property," he replied finally. "State your business plain, then leave." The man smiled without humor. "Plain enough. She's trouble. Best if we take her off your hands. We'll search, then be gone." Ethan didn't move. "No one searches my home." The second rider shifted in his saddle, impatience showing. The mist made the world feel closer, tighter, as if it were holding its breath. Inside, Maya stood near the window, hidden by the wall, listening. Every muscle in her body remembered what those voices meant. Yet she didn't crumble. Not this time. She watched Ethan's back, the way he didn't shrink, didn't bluff. He simply refused. The tall rider's gaze hardened. "Not asking, friend." Ethan met his eyes, voice still calm. "Then don't mistake me for a friend." For a long moment, nothing moved. The horses blew steam from their nostrils. A crow called somewhere distant. And in that stillness, the truth became clear. These men believed the world bent around them. That laws, people, lives, all of it, could be claimed by force. But this land, this house, this fragile refuge, stood under a different rule. Hands hovered near weapons, not yet drawn, but ready. Ethan didn't reach for his rifle. He didn't need to. His stance alone said it. If there was a line, this was it. Cross it, and there would be no turning back. The first rider studied him for a few silent beats, weighing risk against arrogance. Then he smirked, leaned back, and spat into the snow. "We'll be back," he said, "and next time we won't be asking." They turned their horses and vanished once more into the fog, leaving only churned snow and the echo of threat behind. When Ethan stepped inside, Maya was still by the window. Their eyes met, and in that glance lived 100 truths neither needed to speak. Gratitude, fear, something deeper, an understanding that his choice had bound them together in a way neither had planned. "They'll return," she said. "I know," he answered, "and we'll be ready." She hesitated, then asked the question that had lingered in her chest since dawn. "Why help me? Why risk this?" He considered the fire, then spoke with the quiet certainty that defined him. "Because someone has to say no, because you don't deserve to be hunted." She swallowed, feeling the words settle into the parts of her that had forgotten dignity. No one had ever framed her existence as something worth defending. Until now. That evening, he checked the rifle, not with eagerness, with resignation. Maya tidied the room that had already been tidy, needing her hands to be busy so her thoughts wouldn't drown her. When they finally sat, the silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of everything they were accepting. That danger was coming, that safety had a cost, that loyalty could reshape a man's life overnight. The lantern cast soft light across their faces, touching every unspoken emotion with a golden edge. A fragile piece still lingered, but now it was edged with steel. Maya looked at Ethan and realized that whatever lay ahead, she was no longer running alone. And he understood, with a heaviness that wasn't regret, that he had crossed a line not just against armed strangers, but against the life of distance and solitude he had once used to keep the world at bay. Outside, the mist thickened. Somewhere in it, hooves turned, men planned. Fate narrowed its focus, and at the heart of it, in a small cabin wrapped in winter, two people waited, not with bravado, but with quiet resolve, knowing the storm would soon arrive at their door. Night fell without ceremony, slipping across the valley the way a shadow slides across the surface of still water. Ethan did not light the lantern. He let the darkness hold the cabin, leaving only the low glow of the fire to breathe light into the room. Outside, the world grew quiet in that particular way that means eyes are watching. The snow no longer whispered. It listened. And inside, two people waited. Not side by side at first, but close enough that the silence between them felt intentional rather than empty. Maya stood near the window. The edge of the curtain barely lifted as she looked out into the night. She did not tremble, but she did not pretend courage came easily either. There was tension beneath her skin, the kind that grows from too many nights like this, too many footsteps in the dark. Ethan sat in the worn chair, rifle resting across his knees, every sense tuned outward. He had known danger before, known what men became when they believed they owned the world. But tonight, the risk felt different, heavier, because it was no longer his life alone he guarded. "They'll come," Maya said quietly. "Yes," he replied. She didn't ask when. Some things do not need answers, they only need truth. The fire shifted. Heat rose, and for a while, that was the only movement in the room. Eventually, Maya let the curtain fall and crossed the floor with slow, careful steps. She didn't want to break the fragile calm. She sat on the floor near the hearth, close enough that the warmth pressed gently into her bones. Ethan watched her from the corner of his eye, then looked back to the door, steady as a mountain ridge. "You've dealt with men like them before," she said. "Yes." "Did you win?" He was quiet a moment. Then he shook his head. "I survived." It wasn't a boast. It wasn't a legend. It was simply a fact. And in that honesty, Maya heard something deeper. He did not pretend strength came without cost. The conversation drifted like smoke. She asked him, gently, why a man like him chose to live alone out here, on the edge of nowhere. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was low. "Because it's quieter, because the world can't lie to you out here." Then, softer still. "And because sometimes distance hurts less than being disappointed." She breathed in slowly. She understood loneliness in a way few people did. Not the simple kind. The kind that came from being seen only as what others wanted from you. As property, as burden, as symbol, rarely as person. "I didn't think anyone would help me," she said. "Not really. Not without wanting something in return." He didn't look at her. But she could tell he was listening with everything in him. "You didn't ask me for anything," she continued. "Not even gratitude. That's why I stayed." The words landed like falling snow, soft but impossible to ignore. Ethan finally turned his head, meeting her eyes. There was no fire in his expression, no grand declaration, just a steadiness that felt like shelter. "You deserve to choose," he said. "Most people never get that chance." Something shifted inside her then. Not dramatically, not loud, just a quiet loosening of a weight she had carried far too long. Outside, a branch cracked. Both of them froze. Not in fear, but in readiness. Ethan rose slowly, lifting the rifle, moving to the window without sound. Maya stayed close to the hearth, her body tense but grounded. She listened with the kind of focus born from survival. But nothing came. The night held its breath, teasing the nerves of the living. Minutes stretched into long, thin threads of time. Eventually, Ethan returned to the chair. His jaw tightened. "They're testing our patience," he said. seeing if we'll make mistakes." Her voice remained calm. "We won't." Silence settled again, but this time it felt different. Closer, more intimate, as if danger had stripped away the unnecessary layers of their lives and left only what mattered. They were not strangers anymore. They were not merely protector and protected. They were two souls who had met at the edge of the world, where truth had no choice but to be simple. After a while, Maya moved closer. She did not ask permission. She simply sat beside the chair, resting her hand lightly on his wrist. It was a small gesture, yet it held more weight than any vow. Ethan didn't startle. He didn't stiffen. He just looked down at her hand, then at her face, and the corner of his mouth softened in a way that spoke more than words. Fear was still there. So was uncertainty. But now, neither of them faced it alone. The hours crawled forward. The night deepened. At some point, Maya leaned her head lightly against his arm. Ethan let out a slow breath, as though the cabin itself had finally relaxed. He didn't promise her safety. He couldn't. What he offered instead was presence. Unwavering. Honest. Real. Outside, unseen hooves moved somewhere in the dark. Plans formed, lines were drawn. Inside, by the red glow of dying embers, a different kind of decision took shape. Quiet, steady, and strong. They would not run. They would not surrender her life to the hands of men who believed they could claim it. If the storm returned, they would face it together. No contracts, no vows, just choice. When the lantern would finally be lit again, when morning found them here still standing, nothing would be exactly as it had been before. But as the fire dimmed and the night wrapped tight around the cabin, one truth had already taken root. What had begun as refuge had become something deeper, and neither of them was willing to let it go. Morning arrived quietly, as if the night had agreed to withdraw and leave the cabin in peace. The sky was clear for the first time in days, a pale winter blue stretching over the valley. Snow glittered beneath the early sun, every surface sharp and calm. Ethan stepped out onto the porch and listened. No hoofbeats, no distant voices, only the steady sigh of wind through the pines and the low creak of the wooden boards beneath his boots. Danger had not disappeared from the world, but it had passed them by, for now. He let the silence sit with him a moment longer before going back inside. Maya was already awake, kneeling near the stove, feeding the flames with careful hands. She looked different in the light of safety. Still strong, still guarded, but softer at the edges. When she lifted her gaze to Ethan, there was no question in her eyes. Only awareness. Only truth. The long night had not broken them. It had simply revealed the shape of what they already were. "They didn't come back," she said. "No," he replied. "Not yet. Maybe not at all." She nodded. Not out of relief alone, but acceptance. Fear wasn't gone. It had just lost its grip. The day moved forward in simple, grounded rhythms. Ethan checked the barn hinge that had loosened with the cold. Maya brushed down the horse with slow, steady strokes. The ordinary work did something steady to their breathing, to their thoughts. There was no triumph, no celebration, just life reclaiming its place, inch by inch, from the shadow of violence. Later, inside the cabin, Maya set something on the table, a carved token, small, worn, full of history. Ethan recognized it for what it was, a piece of herself, a link to where she had come from, to the people and stories that had shaped her long before this winter. She didn't explain. She didn't need to. Placing it there meant only one thing. She was no longer halfway gone. He stood there for a moment, looking at the token, then at her. His voice was quiet when he finally spoke. This place. It was meant for one man once, a man who didn't expect anyone to stay, but it doesn't have to stay that way. There's room here. Enough for two. He paused, letting the meaning hold steady in the air. If you want it? Maya didn't answer right away. She walked to the window and looked out at the snow-covered world. She thought of the camp, the laughter, the firelight that used to mean home. She thought of the men who tried to erase it, And then she thought of this cabin, this man, and the quiet strength that had welcomed her without chains or demands. When she turned back, there was clarity in her expression. "I don't want to run anymore," she said. "Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because I choose to be here." The distinction mattered, and Ethan understood that better than most. He nodded. Not as a man claiming something, but as a man accepting a gift he never expected to receive. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, whole, alive. That evening they worked side by side without effort. Ethan patched a loose board. Maya tidied the shelves. The cabin felt different, still simple, still small, but no longer temporary. The walls didn't just shelter them from the cold. They held their future, fragile but real. As night fell again, Ethan lit the lantern this time. Light filled the space, warm and steady. Maya stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders brushed. There was no need to speak of loyalty or love or promises. Everything important was already woven into the quiet way they moved together. They had not defeated every danger. The world beyond the valley still held men who believed power meant possession. But here, in this small corner of the West, two lives had chosen one another freely. That was their victory. Before sleeping, Ethan checked the latch on the door, not with fear, but with calm habit. Maya placed another piece of wood on the fire. Then they sat at the table for a while, the lantern flickering softly between them. Outside, the land rested beneath the winter sky. Inside, their hearts did the same, and somewhere within the silence, a truth settled into place like snow finding its home on the earth. This wasn't refuge anymore. It was life. It was belonging. It was a home they had chosen together. The night closes softly over the valley now, and the wind drifts across the snow like a quiet lullaby. Inside the cabin, the fire hums gently, throwing warm light against the wooden walls. The danger that once haunted every breath has eased away into the distance, leaving behind something tender, steady, and real. Ethan and Maya sit together in that glow, no longer strangers bound by fear, but partners bound by choice. Their lives have carried scars, and the world beyond their refuge is still wide and uncertain. Yet here, for this moment, peace settles over them like the soft fall of winter light. This cabin, once only a shelter for one man, has become a place where two souls can finally rest. And as the new year stretches quietly ahead, it promises not perfection, but honesty, courage, and shared strength. The story closes not with noise, but with a whisper, as warm and gentle as the embers fading in the hearth. End of article. Good night.